The drills had been screaming for hours. In the depths of shalecliff, a mining colony clinging to the barren skin of a backwater world in the segmentum obscurus. The sound was constant. Augers grinding, plasma torches roaring, the earth splitting under mechanical fury. The ground here was iron hard, veins of adamantium threaded through black shale, but the Imperium demanded it all. The miners of shalecliff laboured under flickering lumen strips, sweat dripping through clogged filters, their lungs wheezing behind cracked rebreathers. Overseers stalked the catwalks above, shock malls crackling as reminders of what happened when quotas weren't met. Sergeant Vlon of the 212th Haraxian Infantry watched from his security post near Shaft 12. His men had been rotated here weeks ago to keep order. Guard duty was never glorious, but this was suffocating. Watching miners break themselves against the rock, dying for quotas written by quills 100 systems away. There was no honour, no fight, just boredom. But that day, monotony ended. The primary drill head, a riser-built machine whose auger was thicker than a Lehman Russ tank, shrieked as it tore into a ridge of stubborn blackstone. Sparks and dust erupted in choking plumes, drowning the shaft in haze. The ground shuddered. Then all at once the sound stopped. Silence. A hollow collapse groaned from the depths. The drill stuttered, whining, before choking to a halt. "Void, take it," Overseer Kren spat, slamming his control room. "We've punched through." The cavernous shaft exhaled a cloud of ancient dust. The miners coughed, their vis filters hissing, the taste of stone and iron thick in their mouths. As the cloud settled, they saw it. A black wound in the rock, a yawning cavern torn open by the drill. No light reached its depths. "Flood lamps down there now," Kren barked. "The quotas won't fill themselves." Servo cranes lowered floodlights, their beams stabbing into the abyss. Shadows withdrew reluctantly. The light revealed shapes. The cavern floor was crowded with bulbous pods, slick as though coated in some sort of resin. Dozens, hundreds. They stood in rows, organic, glistening, their curved shells the size of a man's torso. They pulsed faintly in the light, damp as open wounds. The air shimmered with a greasy humidity, stinking of rot and ammonia. "Saints preserve us," whispered a miner, his hand tightening on his plasma cutter. "They're just rocks," one of the miners snapped, though unease cracked his voice. "Catalogue it and drill around." 6 miners were ordered down. Reluctantly, they clipped on mag clamps, descended cables, and dropped onto the cavern floor. Their boots crunched on resinous stone. Their helmet lamps cut thin cones into the black. The air here was wrong. Thick, warm, almost alive. Their radios crackled. "Base, this is Shaft Team. Visibility is poor. These formations don't look natural." "Static," answered. They tried again. Nothing. "The Vox is dead," one muttered. The silence pressed on them. The 6 clustered together, headlamps darting from pod to pod. Then one stirred. The top opened apart like petals, peeling back with a wet, sinewy sound. Something inside shifted. The miners froze, transfixed. A blur of pale, spider-like limbs exploded upward. The thing latched onto a miner's helmet with a slap, long fingers locking tight. A tail whipped around his throat, squeezing. He screamed, muffled, thrashing as his comrades clawed at him. Another pod opened, then another. Shapes burst free, leaping through the limited light. "Emperor, save us," one shrieked, swinging his plasma cutter wildly. One of the creatures lunged. He sliced through it, but its blood sprayed, sizzling across his arm. His sleeve dissolved, flesh bubbling into vapor. His scream rose and rose, a sound that curdled blood. The cavern erupted into chaos. The face-huggers bounded from egg to egg, scuttling faster than anyone could see. The miners swung picks, cutters, fists, anything. But these things were relentless, their tails coiling like whips, their legs wrapping around their skulls. One by one, the men fell, choked, pinned, muffled by thrashing limbs. The last miner, eyes wide with madness, staggered backward, slamming his fist into his vox. "Help! The rocks! There!" A shape struck him full in the chest, and the signal cut to static. Above, Overseer Kren cursed and hammered the console. "What's happening down there? Respond!" Vlon frowned. The Auspex still showed 6 life signs, and so, above, they continued their relentless work. Several hours passed. Darkness, pain. The miners awoke, sprawled across the cavern floor. Their throats were raw, their helmets shattered. Their bodies were slick with sweat and slime. And around them lay the creatures that had attacked them, curled, shriveled husks like desiccated spiders, dead where they'd fallen. For long moments the men lay there, trembling, gasping. What happened?" one croaked. "Were we attacked?" another stammered, eyes darting across the corpses. No one answered. They each felt it, the wrongness inside their chests, but none dared speak it. "Listen," rasped Hall, the oldest among them. "We say nothing. Nothing. The Overseer docks us for losing tools. He'll damn sure dock us if he thinks we slacked or hallucinated. We keep this to ourselves." The others nodded, hollow-eyed. The Imperium's cruelty was greater than their terror. Together they climbed, mag clamps dragging them up the shaft walls. Their hands bled, their bodies were shaking, but they pulled themselves back into the light. At the top of the shaft, Overseer Kren stood waiting, shock maul in hand, his face twisted in surprise. "Well, I'll be. We thought you were all dead in a gas leak or something." "We weren't," Hull muttered, collapsing to his knees. Kren scowled. "Good. Less paperwork. Now get your worthless hides back to work. Quotas don't fill themselves. No sympathy, no questions, just orders." The miners looked at one another, terror mirrored in their eyes, but none spoke. They returned to their drills. Hours passed. The drills thundered. Then one of the six, a gaunt man named Joran, staggered. His cutter fell from his hands. He dropped to his knees, clutching his stomach. His scream tore through the cavern, a shriek so high it split the air. He convulsed, veins bulging. His chest swelled unnaturally, ribs cracking outward. Blood gushed from his mouth. Something burst from his sternum, slick and serpentine, shrieking as it tore free in a fountain of blood. The miners shrieked. The overseer shouted. Guardsmen swung their lasguns around. But before they could react, the others began convulsing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each chest exploded in a spray of bone and blood. Infant horrors wriggled free, tails snapping, inner jaws clicking. Screams filled the mine. Workers dropped their tools, running, trampling over one another. The overseers shouted in panic, striking wildly with shock mauls. "Open fire," Vlon roared. Lasguns flared. Beams of red seared through the air, cutting one of the creatures in half. It shrieked, acid spraying across a guardman's boot. He screamed as flesh and metal dissolved together. The newborn scattered into the shadows. The cavern echoed with hisses and the sound of claws skittering across stone. Vlon's hand tightened on his rifle. He knew then something had been unleashed that no drill, no quota, and no single soldier could contain. The shaft was a tomb. Screams had already died, leaving only the echo of dripping fluids and the far-off rasp of machinery still chewing at stone somewhere else. The smell was the worst, the copper tang of blood mixing with acrid burn where acid had eaten through rockcrete. Sergeant Vlon pulled his rebreather tighter, though it did nothing. He had smelled death before, on a dozen battlefields, but this was different. Death didn't usually move like this. "Squad, with me. Form a line," he ordered, his voice cold steel against the hush. 4 guardsmen flanked him, their lasguns held in trembling hands. Their eyes darted into the dark. White slivers in faces masked by grime and fear. The cavern was huge, jagged edges spiking from the earth like broken teeth. Lumen flares cast long shadows, dancing unnaturally against the resin-coated walls. Something deeper, unseen things hissed and clicked, their voices echoing across stone. Private Hahn spat to the side, though his mouth was too dry for any real spit to form. His hands shook on his lasgun's grip. "Sergeant, what are these things?" Vlon's voice came low, iron pressed into his throat. "It doesn't matter. Las to target, short bursts, don't let them get close." The cavern answered with a sound that wasn't human. A wet skitter, claws dragging across stone. Gravel trickled down from the ceiling as something shifted above. The guardsmen snapped their rifles toward the sound. Beams of red light trembled as they swept the darkness. Nothing, only shadows and stone. "Contact right," Brand bellowed, panic cracking his voice. He squeezed his trigger, las bolts crackling into the black. For a heartbeat, the chamber lit red. And there it was. A shape, tall and grotesquely thin, darting between stone columns. Its hide gleamed like wet obsidian, ribs heaving as it moved with inhuman speed. For the briefest second, its skull caught the light. Long, smooth, faceless. Vlon's voice cut sharp. Controlled fire. A storm of red beams raked the cavern. The creature shrieked, a sound so sharp it made their teeth ache, as the lasfire carved glowing gouges into its black armour. It staggered, its limbs convulsing as if puppet strings had been cut. Then it collapsed against the cavern wall, twitching. Acid hissed, eating pits into the stone where it spilled. The guardsmen exhaled as one, their relief jagged and brittle. Then came another sound, a hiss, low and furious. It reverberated through the stone like a living growl. From the gloom it emerged, taller, stronger, already grown beyond the thing they had just killed. Its skull gleamed, its elongated jaws dripping with strands of slime. Its tail lashed against the ground like a whip, sparks crackling where the barbed tip struck stone. "Emperor, protect us," Han whispered, his eyes wide. "It's bigger than the—" "Shoot it," Vlon roared. The squad unleashed hell. Bolts lanced through the dark, sizzling against the creature's limbs. But it did not slow. Its gait was wrong, too fast, too smooth. It darted forward with predatory speed, weaving through fire like a nightmare born to hunt. Private Marek screamed as the Xenomorph's tail punched straight through his chest plate with a wet crunch. The serrated barb burst through his back, lifting him into the air like a ragdoll. He flailed, lasgun clattering to the ground, blood spilling down in thick curtains. The alien pulled him close. Its second jaw shot forward, punching through his skull with a sickening crack. Bone splintered, flesh burst, and his scream cut to silence as his head caved in. His body twitched once, then hung limp on the tail before being hurled aside. Han shouted in wordless horror, firing wildly into the beast's torso. Chunks of blackened flesh burst away, but acid sprayed outward, sizzling across his arm. The skin fell away in molten ribbons, muscle hissing as it cooked. His scream filled the cavern, a sound so raw it could almost be mistaken for an animal. Vlon had to do something to buy the rest of his squad time, and so he moved. He lunged forward, jamming his lasgun under the beast's chin. "Die, you Xenos filth," he roared, finger clamping the trigger. Bolts seared upward, exploding through the creature's elongated skull. The head burst like an overripe fruit, showering the sergeant in gore. Acid blood drenched him. It splashed across his breastplate, eating straight through the plasteel as if it were paper. Smoke curled upward, flesh boiled beneath. Vlon howled, a bellow that echoed off the walls. He staggered, clawing at the melting ruin of his armour. And that heartbeat of agony, that moment of distraction, cost him. Something moved above. The shadows broke. Another Xenomorph dropped from the ceiling like a living shadow, landing in a crouch that cracked the stone beneath it. Before Vlon could turn, it was upon him. Claws punched straight through his shoulder, tearing through flesh and bone alike. its inner jaw extended, slamming into his throat with the force of a hammer. Blood sprayed across the cavern wall as his scream gurgled to silence. The beast ripped him apart in seconds. His body fell in pieces, his lasgun clattering uselessly into the dark. The remaining survivors broke. Bran screamed, firing blind bolts ricocheting wildly. He saw shapes everywhere, slithering along the ceiling, darting between columns. Too many, too fast. Harn stumbled, clutching his ruined arm, sobbing into the ruin of his rebreather. No, no, thrones no. Something burst from the shadows, striking like a scythe. Bran's torso was split open in one stroke, ribs torn free in a spray of red. His scream ended before it began. Harn backed against the wall, gasping, until claws speared him clean through the stomach. The alien hoisted him up, its inner jaw slamming forward. His skull imploded with a wet crunch. Skull fragments spattering against the cavern floor like dice. The chamber drowned in screams. The guardsmen had died one by one, torn open, impaled, shredded in fountains of gore. Claws raked, tails pierced, the inner jaws shattering the skulls of men in a rain of bone and blood. And then, as quickly as it had begun, there was silence. Only the hiss of acid eating stone, only the drip of blood across the cavern floor. The Imperial guardsmen were gone. Overseer Kren slammed the Vox set. Static howled back. Squad 12, respond. Guardsmen, answer your overseer. Emperor's blood. Somebody say something. Nothing. Just the soft drone of the drills outside and the muffled panic of miners whispering as rumours spread. Technician Laura, pale under the lumen strips, turned from her auspex. Sir, they're life signs. They're gone. Kren's jaw clenched. Gone? It must be a malfunction. It's no malfunction, she whispered. Kren rounded on her. You think I'll be the one who tells the Administratum their quota has stopped because some rock rats vanished? You keep drilling. That's an order. But his words trembled, and everyone heard it. Moments later, the Vox flared with static. Not voices, but something else. A hiss, a screech. But definitely not human. Then silence. The miners looked at one another, their eyes wide, their bodies tense. No one dared speak. Someone finally did. We need to send for help. Deep under the stone, the nest stirred. In the cavern of eggs, shadows shifted. Resin glistened wet, reflecting the glow of dying lumen flames. One by one, the eggs opened, wet petals peeling back. The air filled with a skittering chorus. Pale shapes uncoiled, stretching long, finger-like limbs. The hive was waking. From the black depths of the cavern, a shape far larger than the rest stirred, a silhouette towering, crowned, its breathing a wet rasp that shook the walls. The Queen was awake, and her children were hungry. For 3 weeks, the mining world of Shalecliff had fallen silent. No Vox traffic, no tithe reports, no survivors, just silence. From orbit, the planet looked sick, its surface scarred by strip mines and riddled with drilling shafts, like wounds carved into stone. The Administratum demanded explanation, and the Inquisition whispered of possible Xenos corruption. It was enough to send word to the Angels of Caliban. The strike cruiser Absolution's Vow drifted above the planet, its prow a cathedral of steel, banners snapping in the void. Within its hangar, 4 figures stood like statues of war, the Dark Angels. Silent, death incarnate. The drop pod hung in the launch cradle, its petals shut like a steel coffin. Inside, the 4 Astartes prepared. Sergeant Kale, their leader, towered at the front, his armour dark green but trimmed with bone white. The winged sword of the chapter was etched into his pauldron. His helm was locked, his lenses glowing faint emerald. He held his power sword across his lap in quiet ritual, its edge gleaming with sanctified oil. Beside him sat Brother Malachor, heavy and broad, even by Space Marine standards, his bulk magnified by the thunderous weight of his heavy bolter. He muttered a low catechism as he fed blessed rounds into the magazine. Opposite, Brother Gideon checked the seals on his bolter, methodical as clockwork. His faith was calm, his voice measured even when it never rose above a whisper. Finally, there was Brother Lucian, the youngest of the squad, clad in battle-scarred plate, but eager-eyed. He cradled his combat knife like a relic. His every movement was sharp with anticipation. "Brothers," Kale intoned, his voice a growl within their voxnet. "We descend into silence. There will be no fear, no hesitation. We will learn the truth of this place. We will bring the Emperor's light to the dark." The pod shuddered. The klaxon roared. Launch. The pod tore free of the cruiser like a spear of fire. It screamed through atmosphere, wrapped in flame, the clouds splitting as it plunged. The 4 Astartes stood braced, immovable like stone. The impact alarms blared. Then, impact. The pod slammed into the surface with the force of a bombardment shell. Stone cracked, metal screamed, dust blew outward, a storm of fire and ash. The petals blew open with thunderclap detonations, and the Dark Angels advanced. Shalecliff's command post lay in ruin. Wind howled across abandoned hab blocks, carrying the stink of rust and burnt ozone. Lumen strips flickered weakly in the dark, shadows crawling across walls slick with grime. Kale's boots thudded against broken stone as the squad advanced in a wedge, their bolters raised. Their emerald armour loomed in the haze like gods of war descending into hell. "There is no Vox traffic," Gideon said flatly, scanning the static in his helm. "The Auspex shows no life signs." "Incorrect," Kale replied. His eyes swept across melted steel and shattered plasteel. He knelt, running a gauntlet across a discarded lasgun. The barrel was warped and blackened. There was life. There was a fight. They lost. Lucian paused near a wall. The stone was pitted, eaten away by something corrosive. He placed 2 armoured fingers against the wound,
and hissed. "Acid." Malachor snorted. "Tyranids?" "Perhaps," Kale said coldly. "But I have fought the Great Devourer. This feels different." They pressed on. The facility stretched before them, cavernous halls echoing with their footsteps, empty bunks, overturned rations, Vox units crushed, and everywhere the marks of struggle, blood, acid burns, a war fought in shadows. Kale lifted his hand. "We split. Lucian with me. Gideon, Malachor, hold the north tunnels." The squad broke apart, their heavy boots echoing like drums of war. Kale and Lucian descended into the mine shafts, their armor's lumen lamps casting narrow beams. The air was foul, thick with resinous growth clinging to the stone. Then they found them. The miners, cocooned into the walls. Their bodies were fused into the resin, their torsos bare, their mouths sealed with filth. Their eyes rolled wildly as muffled whispers escaped. One stirred as Kale approached, straining against the Xenos binding. With sudden strength, the cocoon cracked. The man's head jerked forward, his voice ragged. "Please, Emperor, please, free me. It hurts. They're inside. They're..." Kale's helm lenses narrowed. He scanned with his auspex. Readings bloomed red, heart rate spiking. A foreign biomass was detected. He drew his bolt pistol. Lucian glanced at him. "He yet breathes, Brother Sergeant. Shall we cut him free?" Kale's voice was stone. "No. He is compromised." The miner's eyes widened, filling with tears. "No. No, please." Kale's pistol thundered. The man's skull burst, fragments scattering across resin. His body sagged. Lucian bowed his head. "Mercy through death." Kale reloaded. His voice was iron. "We move." Meanwhile, Malachor and Gideon pressed deeper into the shaft. The air grew hotter, fouler, slick with resin that glistened like coagulated blood. Then the ground gave way. The rock split beneath Gideon's boots, collapsing into a yawning pit. With instinct born of centuries of war, he rolled mid-fall, landing in a crouch that shook the stone. His armor groaned, but held. He voxed upward. "Brother Malachor, hold position. I will find a way back up and return." "Confirmed," Malachor's voice rumbled. Gideon turned. His lumen beam stretched across an abyss of black. Resin covered every surface. And there, in the center of the cavern, eggs. Hundreds. Tall, leathery pods stood in rows, pulsing faintly as if alive. Their wet surfaces gleamed under his light. Gideon raised his bolt pistol. His combat knife rasped free in his other hand. He advanced, every step echoing like thunder in the silence. Then, one opened. A wet hiss. The petals peeled back. Something inside moved. A pale, spindly creature, uncoiled like a spider, its tail snapping in the air. It screeched and launched itself. Gideon moved like lightning. His knife slashed upward, bisecting the thing mid-air. It shrieked as it fell in two, acid hissing across the ground. Another leapt. He fired. The bolter roared, the creature exploding into gore. Acid splattered across his gauntlet, burning deep. His knife fell, its blade dissolving as smoke curled upward. A third came, too close. He fired point blank, the bolt shell detonating it in a spray. Acid blood splashed across his helm, blinding him. Warning runes screamed red. His hand shot to the mag clamps. With steady precision, he pulled free his helm and cast it aside, steam rising from the molten ruin. His scarred face glistened with sweat, eyes unflinching, calm, unbroken. The last facehugger leapt. He raised his pistol. Click. It was empty. The creature slammed into him, legs locking around his skull. The tail cinched tight around his throat. His roar of defiance was cut off as it latched. His body convulsed, then slumped unconscious. The cavern echoed with silence. The eggs pulsed, waiting. At the rim of the pit, Malachor prowled like a caged lion, heavy bolter raised. His helm lenses swept the shadows. Then he heard it. Movement. A hiss from the dark. Another answered it. Then another. Shapes slithered into view. Tall, black, gleaming. Their skulls were smooth, their claws dripping with blood. One crawled across the ceiling above him. Another scaled the wall like a spider, their tails lashing. Malachor's vox crackled with static. Gideon's channel was dead. The heavy weapon roared in his fists, its thunder shaking stone. Shells tore the dark apart, shredding resin, collapsing walls. The creatures darted, shadows weaving. Their screeches cut the air like blades. Malachor's teeth bared behind his helm. His heart was steady. His fury was pure. Come then, he thought. Come and be broken. He slammed a fresh drum into his heavy bolter, racking it with a growl. Strike me if you dare. The Xenomorphs circled. The Dark Angel waited. Malachor stood at the rim of the shaft, a solitary warrior surrounded by silence. His heavy bolter hummed with machine spirit fury, each round waiting in the drum like caged thunder. The silence broke. A hiss, then another. Dozens of them. The shadows rippled, and the cavern vomited monsters. The Xenomorphs poured forth in a tide of black sinew and gleaming teeth, tails thrashing, claws gouging the stone as they closed in from every angle. The walls, the ceiling, the floor. The cavern seemed alive with their shrieks, but Malachor did not flinch. He braced his bolter, lenses glowing cold green. His voice growled the catechism of hatred. By bolt and flame, you shall know death. His weapon roared. Explosive shells ripped the air apart, detonating inside the Xenos bodies. Limbs burst, skulls disintegrated, tails snapped like whips made of glass. Acid blood splattered in geysers, hissing against his armor, but the ceramite held. The storm of fire was relentless. Each burst was precise, each shot deliberate. One Xenomorph lunged from the ceiling. Malachor pivoted, a shell detonating it mid-air, showering acid and flesh across the cavern. Another darted from the shadows. 2 rounds tore through its legs. A third split its skull like kindling. The Dark Angel advanced into the horde, steady as a juggernaut. Bolter thunder matched his heartbeat, Where lesser men would have panicked, he was calm. His aim was perfect, his fury absolute. 5 xenomorphs leapt at once, claws reaching for his helm. He stepped back, heavy bolter bellowing. 2 died in a shower of gore. One's torso was blown apart. Another's tail was shredded, sending it writhing to the ground. The last slammed into his chest plate, but Malachor's armoured fist rose, seizing it by the throat. With a roar, he crushed its neck and hurled it aside as the heavy bolter executed it in mid-flight. The Xenos faltered. Their screeches turned wary. The thunder of his bolter did not cease. One by one they fell, broken bodies smoking and twitching at his feet. The last survivors hissed in frustration, circling wide. Then, with a chorus of snarls, they melted back into the shadows. The cavern fell silent again. Malachor lowered his weapon. Smoke hissed from its barrel, the machine spirit purring in satisfaction. Around him, alien corpses lay scattered, limbs blown apart, acid pooling across the stone. He stepped to one of the bodies, kicking it onto his back. His helm lenses scanned the carcass, noting the elongated skull, the biomechanical carapace, the acidic fluids. He muttered, reflective. Too close to the great devourer, but not the same, not Tyrannid. A cousin, maybe. A mutation. He knelt, talons scraping the resin. Or something older. Something we were never meant to find. Down in the pit, Gideon stirred. His vision swam, his head pounding with a pressure that felt wrong. His last memory was fire, claws, shrieks, the stench of acid. Then, blackness. He groaned, rising to one knee. His helm lay a few feet away. The lenses were cracked, smoke still curling from acid scars. His bolt pistol rested near a resin-covered wall. With practiced calm, he collected them. His fingers reloaded the pistol from his belt, each round sliding home with the familiarity of ritual. He lifted the helmet, regarding the melted ruin of it. A lesser warrior would discard it, but Gideon was Astartes, and so he forced it back onto his head, locking the seals with a hiss. Warning runes still blinked red across the display, but his vision steadied. The eggs around him lay still. Their petals were closed. For now. He looked up. The shaft towered above him, jagged and slick with resin. Without hesitation, he began to climb. Claws of ceramite dug into stone. His muscles strained, but held. His breath was steady and measured. At the top, he emerged into ruin and corpses. Malachor turned as his brother hauled himself over the edge. His heavy bolter was slung across his back. The cavern floor below a graveyard of Xenos. "You are alive," Malachor rumbled. "I am," Gideon said. His voice was rough but calm. "I encountered something. There are eggs below. My weapon was fired. I recall flashes. Then nothing. I must have been dazed by something." Malachor studied him, his helm lenses narrowing. Gideon forced his stance tall and unflinching. Gideon glanced at the alien bodies and gave a dry chuckle. "I see you were busy without me." Malachor snorted. the closest thing to a laugh. Xenos filth. They're not tyrannid. There's something else. Then we regroup, Gideon said. His tone was iron now. With Kale, with Lucian, this mine must burn. The two Astartes advanced through the tunnels, Malachor dragging one of the alien corpses behind him like a hunter displaying his kill. Its tail scraped across stone, leaving a trail of acid scorch marks. At last, they rejoined Kale and Lucian. The sergeant stood tall, power sword glowing faintly with sanctified oils. Lucian's armor was streaked with resin, his knife dirty with gore. Kale turned. Report. Malachor dropped the corpse with a thud, black ichor pooling around it. Xenos slain, dozens of them. They bleed some sort of acid. They are fast and strong, but not beyond bolt and flame. They are not tyrannids, though they carry echoes of the Devourer. Kale knelt, his gauntlets probing the carapace. He sliced a sliver free with his power sword, stowing it into a sanctified vial. We will know their nature, one way or another. Gideon spoke next, his voice steady but grave. Below, I found hundreds of eggs. A nest beyond measure. This world is lost. I recommend Orbital purge. Burn it to ash. Kale's helm inclined. Agreed. There are no survivors here. Only corruption. The Emperor demands fire. Their vox crackled with the voice of the cruiser's command deck. Absolution's vow acknowledges. Target coordinates locked. Shuttle inbound for retrieval. The squad moved to the surface, their boots pounding against stone. A shuttle descended, engines screaming, dusts billowing in hurricane clouds. They boarded, their massive forms filling the hold. As the shuttle rose, the four dark angels stood at the open ramp, gazes fixed on the scarred surface below. From orbit, the Absolution's vow turned its fury upon shalecliff. Lance batteries ignited. The heavens themselves screamed as beams of fire speared downward. The mining complex vanished in a storm of plasma. The ground split, molten rivers pouring into the shafts. The nest burned, the eggs cooked in their shells. The queen screamed in the dark, and was silenced as her brood was erased in fire. The planet wept ash. In the cruiser's observation deck, the squad stood together, silent as statues. They watched until nothing remained but ruin. It is done, Kale said at last. The Emperor's justice is delivered. Hours later, the squad was dismissed to their quarters, and Kale's orders were simple. Rest. The war does not wait. Malachor stalked to the armory, stripping gore from his heavy bolter. Lucian knelt in prayer. Kale remained with the apothecaries, analysing the Xenos sample. Gideon walked alone. His armour was dented, scarred, still hissing where acid had burned deep. He entered his chamber, sealing the door behind him. He laid his weapons across the shrine table, wiping each with oil. His hands moved with precision until they stopped. A spasm. Pain lanced through his chest, sharp as a blade. He staggered, one gauntlet clenching his stomach. His breath caught. The agony spread. A pressure building deep within. Unnatural and alien. He sank to one knee, helmet slamming against the floor. His hearts thundered. Sweat poured down his scarred face. Something moved inside him. His teeth clenched, a growl of fury escaping. He was Astartes. He would not fall to pain. He would not fall to fear. But then the movement grew violent. Something clawed at his insides, pushing outward. His armor groaned, plates buckling. A sharp edge pressed against his ribcage, straining to break free. He slammed a gauntlet against his chest, roaring, forcing the thing down. The ceramite plates held, barely. His vision blurred. His breath came ragged. He fell back against the wall, bile rising in his throat. Still he endured. Still he fought to contain it. But he knew something was inside him, and it wanted out. The shrine chamber was dark, save for the flickering votive lights burning from the aquila. The sanctified incense did nothing to mask the reek of acid-scorched ceramite, blood, and something deeper, something wrong. Gideon writhed on the floor, gauntlets scraping the stone as another convulsion ripped through him. His twin hearts hammered like war drums gone wild. One beat dragging, the other racing, fighting each other for rhythm. Pain lanced through his chest, so sharp it blurred the edges of his vision. He could feel it now. Not just moving, not just clawing, growing. Each spasm forced it upward, toward his lungs, his ribcage. The ceramite plating of his breastplate dented, warped, half melted, bulging outward with the pressure of something inside him trying to break free. Xenos. Filth. Gideon growled through clenched teeth, voice distorted by vox filters as blood bubbled in his throat. I'll kill you. His hand reached, trembling but steady in its intent, toward the combat blade laid across the shrine table. He seized it, the edge gleaming in the half-light, sanctified oil still drying along its length. His other hand rose to his armor, gauntlets clawing into the plating over his chest. Ceramite groaned, locks hissed. With a roar of fury and agony, Gideon tore his armor apart, prying a gap wide enough for the thing to burst through. It did not hesitate. The pain was beyond mortal comprehension as his ribcage split and the creature surged for freedom. His blood sprayed across the walls, a crimson arc that defiled the shrine. Gideon's hand shot inward, lightning fast, closing around the slippery, thrashing abomination. For a moment, he held it. His gauntlet closed, servos whirring, bones snapping under his enhanced grip. The creature shrieked, a piercing, alien cry, its inner jaws snapping wildly against his palm. Its body was unlike anything Gideon had seen before. Its skin was darker than obsidian, yet veined with faint emerald light. The carapace was thicker, ridged, pulsing with unnatural strength. Where a lesser chestburster would have been crushed like vermin, this thing resisted. Its flesh refused to yield. Its strength rivaled his own. And it looked at him. Its infant head turned, eyes glistening with intelligence it should not yet possess. Not an animal hunger, but awareness. Gideon's vision swam, his muscles faltering as blood poured from his wound, pooling beneath him. His grip loosened. Not Enough strength, he muttered, rage boiling through his fading consciousness. But I'll end you. The creature seized its chance. With a whip crack of speed, it tore free from his grip, scuttling across the chamber. Its claws left trails in the stone, its body already larger, faster, more deliberate than any newborn should be. It vanished into a vent with a hiss, leaving only the echo of its departure. Gideon collapsed, his blade slipping from numb fingers. His blood spread in rivers across the floor, soaking the shrine, the light of the candles flickering in the crimson tide. Darkness closed in. Hours later, deep within the cruiser Absolution's vow, the lower decks stirred with routine. Serfs moved in disciplined rhythm, checking racks of bolter magazines, calibrating heavy weapon mounts, hauling crates of munitions blessed with purity seals. The air smelled of sacred oils, sweat. One of them, a young bondsman named Seric, worked alone in the dim confines of a weapons workshop. He wiped down a heavy stubber, its barrel gleaming under the glow of lumen strips. The hum of distant engines filled the silence. Then came a sound. A faint scrape from the ducts above. Seric froze, his rag still pressed against the weapon's casing. He tilted his head, listening. Nothing. He snorted. Deck rats. Always the rats, he muttered, returning to his work. It was louder this time. Closer. He frowned, turning his gaze toward the vent high in the corner. The shadows seemed thicker there, the darkness watching him. He shook his head, muttering a prayer, and focused again on the stubber. Then the vent cover dropped. Something huge unfolded from the shadows, fluid, black, and wrong. Its body stretched and rose, scraping the ceiling. Its limbs were long and powerful, the claws edged like swords. Its skull was elongated like the Xenos he'd seen drawn in training pictographs, but this was broader, ridged with armoured plates that gleamed. And its size. It was larger than a man already, taller than two, in fact. It filled the workshop like a nightmare given form. Seric gasped, stumbling backward. The creature's head cocked, its eyes glowing faint with emerald hate. It hissed, deep, resonant, intelligent. Then it struck. It crossed the space between them in less than a breath, claws flashing. One hand closed around Seric's torso, the other around his legs. With impossible strength, it pulled. Flesh, bone, and sinew tore apart as if made of parchment. Seric's scream was cut short in a spray of blood as the creature ripped him in two. The hybrid lifted one half to its jaws. The inner maw punched forward, cracking bone and tearing flesh. It fed with a grotesque hunger, blood running down its chin, pooling at its feet. Then, finished, it dropped his remains and slithered back into the vents, vanishing as quickly as it had come. Only silence remained. Silence and blood soaking the weapons of the Emperor. Malachor walked the halls like a storm caged in flesh. His armour bore the scars of battle, his heavy bolter freshly anointed with sacred oils, yet his mind was unsettled. Something gnawed at him, a wrongness he could not banish. He reached Gideon's chamber. The door was sealed. The runes of the lock glowed red. He keyed his access. The chamber hissed open. The stench hit him first. Blood, acid, burnt flesh. Inside, Gideon lay slumped against the wall. His armor was torn open. His chest a ruin of gore. His helmet hung askew, cracked lenses flickering. His combat blade rested in a pool of blood at his side. "Brother!" Malachor's voice growled low, fury and dread warring. He strode forward, kneeling beside the fallen Astartes. His gauntlets checked the wounds. Massive, catastrophic, yet somehow Gideon still breathed. Barely. Malachor's eyes narrowed. The damage was not only from within. The walls were scored with claw marks, the vent cover ripped free. Something had been here. Something had been born here. Malachor's lenses burned emerald in the darkness. His heavy bolter rose, scanning the shadows of the chamber, the vents above, the trails of blood leading outward. "Emperor preserve us," he muttered. "What have you unleashed, brother?" Behind him, Gideon stirred weakly, his voice a rasp of agony. "Kill it." Then his head slumped forward, breath shallow. Malachor's grip tightened on his weapon. He rose to his full height, a colossus of iron and wrath. The hunt had begun, and in the vents above, the hybrid stirred, watching, waiting. The shadows whispered with hunger. Malachor's boots thundered against the deck, servos whining with each step as he carried Gideon's limp body across the passageways of the Absolution's vow. Blood streamed down the wounded Astartes' ruined chest, pooling in Malachor's grip. "Hold on, brother," Malachor growled through clenched teeth. "You will not fall to this filth." The doors of the apothecarion hissed open, filling the corridor with antiseptic scent and the smell of sacred medicine. Apothecary Varial turned sharply, his reductor claw gleaming in the lumen light. "By the throne," Varial spat. "Lay him down." Malachor placed Gideon upon the stasis slab. The Medicae engines whirred to life, mag clamps locking him in place. His ruined chest pumped shallowly. Every breath was a ragged hiss. Varial wasted no time. Ruptured sternum, shredded secondary organs, blood loss catastrophic. But both hearts still beat. He fought it, Malachor rumbled, his heavy bolter still hot in his grip. He held it in his hand before it escaped. Varial's helmet tilted. Then his survival is a miracle, or a curse. Servo arms descended, stitching, sealing, pouring burning coagulants into the wound. Gideon thrashed, a strangled roar escaping his throat, before finally sinking into unconsciousness. The apothecary glanced at Malachor. "He will live, for now. But whether the gene seed has been corrupted," Varial left the words unspoken. Malachor's gauntlets clenched. "If it has, I will be the one to end him." He turned, his bolter primed. "I must tell Kale." The doors of the Strategium boomed open, and Malachor strode inside. Kale stood over a hololithic display of the cruiser, emerald light spilling across his scarred face. The veteran sergeant's armor was inscribed with litanies of hatred, his power sword resting on the table's edge. Malachor saluted. "Brother Sergeant, it has begun." Kale looked up, his one good eye burning. "Speak." Malachor recounted the tale in grim detail. Gideon's wounds, this hybrid's birth, the claw marks, the trail into the vents. Kale slammed his fist against the hololith, shattering several projectors. The display flickered and died. By the throne, an entire mine was taken by these beasts, and now one of them is loose on our ship. He drew a long breath, forcing composure. His jaw tightened. If they could consume a world's labor force, they could consume this crew. We are sitting on a coffin waiting to close. He activated the Vox link. Summon the captain. The Strategium doors opened, and Captain Alaric of the Dark Angels strode inside. His presence was like a thunderhead entering the chamber. His armor was ancient. Its plates were pitted and scarred by centuries of war. The lion-headed pauldron gleamed dully in the dim light, and his massive blade rested across his back. His eyes were hard, forged in 1,000 campaigns. Kale saluted sharply. "Captain." Alaric regarded them with grim calm. "You speak of a Xenos loose aboard my ship." "Yes, Lord," Malachor said. "I slew many myself on the surface, but they are not to be underestimated. Brother Gideon nearly slew it as it tore free of him, but it escaped into the vents. Already it feeds." Alaric's jaw tightened, but his tone remained steady as iron. "This vessel carries over 50,000 crew. We cannot risk infestation." His gaze swept them both, like a blade's edge. "We act now, or we lose everything." Captain Alaric strode to the central Vox station. His voice, when it boomed through the ship's systems, was a weapon in itself. "All hands, this is your captain. By my command, the Absolution's vow enters full quarantine. All serfs and crew are confined to quarters. If you see anything that matches the description of a Xenos, you will Vox immediately and do nothing else. Failure to comply is death." He cut the channel, his face grim. "To my brothers of the First Company," he growled, "we mobilize, full deployment, sweep the ship deck by deck. The Xenos dies here." Malachor slammed a fist against his chestplate. "By the lion." The chamber filled with the thunder of oaths and iron determination. For hours, the Dark Angels swept the corridors. 100 Astartes scoured the decks in precise formation, bolters raised, Auspex scanners hissing. The lower decks shook with their march. Vox traffic was sparse, but tense. Squads moved into the weapon holds, the manufactoria, the life support domes. Nothing. Then came the call. Squad hearkened to command. "We found it. Section Delta 9. A serf is dead. Torn apart. Emperor's mercy. It's a slaughterhouse." The Vox crackled with static. And then, "There's a blood trail. It's leading deeper." Kale's eyes narrowed. "Stay on it. Do not engage without report." The squad advanced, tracking the slick crimson across bulkheads and floor plating. Their lumen beams caught something ahead. Crew members, dozens of them, plastered to the walls with some glistening, resinous secretion. Their mouths hung open in silent screams. Their chests heaved faintly, something writhing beneath. "Throne," muttered Brother Harkon. "What manner of—" The shadows erupted. It dropped from the ceiling like living death, a blur of claws and teeth, its obsidian hide gleaming with faint green light. Its head snapped up, jaws opening in a shriek that rattled their armor plating. Brother Cassian barely had time to cry out before the hybrid's tail scythed through his torso. His body split in half, spilling armor fragments and blood across the deck. "Contact!" Harkon roared. Heavy bolters thundered, explosive rounds shredding the corridor. But the hybrid was already moving, weaving through the fusillade with impossible speed. Its claws raked across another brother's helm, tearing it free, along with half of his skull. "Emperor preserve us. It's too fast." The squad fell back, firing desperately. Vox screams filled the air. "We need reinforcements, now." The reinforcements arrived in a storm of bolter fire. 3 squads closed from multiple angles, their bolters roaring in perfect unison. This time, the hybrid could not dodge it all. Explosive shells tore chunks of flesh from its body, ichor spraying in showers of sizzling acid. It shrieked, striking back, claws flashing, tail lashing out. But the circle of Astartes tightened. Their fire was relentless. Finally, a salvo of crack grenades detonated against its chest, blowing it backwards into the bulkhead. The hybrid's scream was cut short as a final bolter barrage tore it apart, chunks of its carapace scattering across the corridor. "Target neutralized," Harkon gasped through the Vox. But then the air filled with hissing. Acid, more potent than anything recorded, sprayed out in torrents. The walls screamed as metal liquefied. The bulkhead sagged, warped, then split. A hole punched through the hull. The ship howled. The Gellerfield shuddered, cracking, and through the rift, the warp poured in. Screams erupted across the Vox. Crewmen wailed in madness as demons spilled into the mortal realm, clawing from the rift like shadows. Fire, blood, and whispering laughter consumed the lower decks. "Warp breach!" cried the helmsman from the bridge. Captain Alaric's eyes flared with fury. "Navigators, pull us from the Imperium, now!" The vessel groaned, its engines straining. Reality twisted as the ship tore itself free of the warp's grasp. With a thunderous crack, it burst back into real space. But it was too late. The Vox screamed with reports. "Deck Gamma 5 is compromised. There's demons everywhere. We had to purge the serfs. The taint spreads too fast. Engaged with warp-spawned fiends, requesting reinforcements." On the hololith, Alaric saw corruption spread like fire through the cruiser. Warp taint devoured decks in minutes. Demons hunting a screaming crew. The lower manufactoria bled crimson light. Alaric's voice cut through the chaos. "All Dark Angels, converge on the breach. Contain the incursion. We will not lose this vessel to filth." Across the decks, squads moved at once, bolters and power swords ready, chanting litanies of purity as they advanced into hell. While the battle raged near the breach, elsewhere on the ship, silence fell over one of the resin-coated chambers. The crew members hanging from the walls twitched, their chests heaved, convulsed, then burst. The air filled with shrieks as new horrors tore free, slick and glistening. Not mere chestbursters, but something else. Their forms were longer, stronger, their hides already darkened and ridged with emerald veins. Dozens of newborns screamed in unison, a choir of hunger. They dropped from the walls, scattering into the ducts, into the shadows. The hybrid had not died alone. It had left behind its children. And the Absolution's vow, now drowning in demons, carried a brood of Xenomorphs unlike any born before. The war for the ship had only just begun. The lower manufactoria of the Absolution's vow burned. Great tongues of fire licked the blackened vaults. The air choked with the stench of ozone, blood, and burning flesh. Warp-spawned abominations shrieked as they were cut down one by one, their howls dissolving into unnatural echoes that clawed at the mind. Captain Alaric stood through the furnace of battle like a lion among jackals. His blade burned with a nimbus of azure fire, cutting through demon flesh as though it were parchment. Each strike tore apart bodies that should not have been, reducing their foul forms to greasy motes of smoke. "Forward, brothers," his voice roared over the vox, steel and fury woven into every syllable. "Purge this corruption. Drive it back to the pit." The first company answered as one. Power swords flashed, bolters thundered, the hymn of vengeance resounded from vox grills. One by one, the warp fiends fell, their bodies unravelling into nothingness, their claws and teeth availing them nothing against the Emperor's chosen. A blood-slicked fiend, horned and many-eyed, leapt for Malachor, its talons raked across his pauldron, scoring the ceramite. But Malachor seized it mid-lunge, breaking its spine across his knee, before crushing its skull beneath his boot. Another demon swelled, its belly glowing with inner fire. Kale's bolt pistol barked 3 times, each round exploding inside its chest, detonating the beast from within. Flames washed across his armour, leaving his litanies of hatred smoking, but unscorched. Minutes passed like hours. The slaughter was relentless. But at last, silence fell. The last demon shrieked as Alaric's blade bisected it, dissolving in a final hateful scream that echoed through the void. Breath heaving, armour slick with blood both human and inhuman, the Dark Angel stood in grim victory. "By the lion," Malachor growled, spitting blood into his helmet's filter. "It is done." "No," Alaric said coldly, turning his gaze skyward, as though his wrath could pierce steel bulkheads. "It is not done. The warp is purged, but the greater threat still lingers." The command deck of the Absolution's vow was a cathedral of iron and light. Great Gothic arches framed cogitator arrays, the golden Aquila looming above the forward viewport like a watchful god. Hundreds of crew bustled at their stations, the navigators hunched in their sacred orreries, their hollow eyes peering into the Imperium's veil. It was here that silence fell. The lumen strips flickered once, twice, plunging the deck into darkness for the span of a heartbeat. a scratching sound echoed in the rafters above. Nervous crew members paused at their consoles, exchanging fearful glances. Then, they came. The ceiling ruptured with a spray of twisted steel and resin. Black shapes dropped like shadows with claws, their bodies sleek and ridged, their eyeless heads gleaming with faint emerald veins. Dozens of them. Newborn yet already monstrous, they shrieked in unison as they fell upon the crew. The first navigator didn't even scream. A barbed tail punched clean through his chest, spraying gore across the hololith. His body was yanked into the air, flailing, before being torn in two like he was nothing. Another scrambled back from his console, shrieking for help, before his skull vanished in a blur of teeth. His brain splattered across the viewing screen, painting the stars crimson. The crew panicked, scattering in all directions, but these hybrids were faster. One lunged, claws shearing through 3 bodies in a single swipe, their entrails spilling across the deck. Another leapt onto the Voxmaster, its inner jaw punching through his helm and ripping his face out in a wet explosion. The navigators, sacred conduits of the warp, fared no better. One raised a trembling hand in a benediction before a Xenos tail scythed his arm free and drove it into his gut, lifting him screaming into the air. His voice choked to a gurgle as his lifeblood poured across the consoles. The bridge had become a slaughterhouse. Blood sprayed in arcs across the hololiths. Bodies fell twitching to the floor, and the sacred controls of the ship were drowned in gore. Through it all, the hybrids moved with horrifying purpose. They ignored certain crew, bypassed others, moving directly for the navigators' stations. Their claws smashed at consoles, tearing through sacred machinery with an intelligence that should not have been theirs. Then the forward viewport shifted. The Absolution's vow shuddered violently, its course veering off. From the black void, a planet filled the screen. A teeming hive world, its spires gleaming like needles of steel and light. The cruiser's engines thundered, uncontrolled, dragging the ship into a collision course. Deep below, Alaric's armor dripped with demon ichor. He stood over the last smouldering remains, his chest heaving, when the Vox shrieked. Alert, alert, collision course detected. Impact in T-minus 20 minutes. The hololithic display flickered to life. The planet loomed ahead. Vast, the ship hurtling towards its atmosphere like an arrow. Alaric's eye widened. He voxed the bridge. "This is Captain Alaric. Respond." Only static answered. Again, louder, his voice thunder. "Bridge, respond. By the throne, answer." Nothing. Malachor cursed, his gauntlets clenched. The bridge is lost. Kale's scarred face hardened, his voice a growl. "Then we take it back." The Dark Angels surged upward through the cruiser, their boots pounding against iron decking, their bolters ready, their oaths of vengeance echoing in their helms. Crew scattered at their passing, pressing themselves against bulkheads, whispering prayers at the sight of the Astartes' grim urgency. The ship shuddered around them, alarms howling, Voxcasters screaming warnings across every deck. Gravity lurched as the ship angled downward, dragged inexorably toward the planet's pole. Impact in 15 minutes, the machine spirit intoned, its voice distorted by damage. They reached the final corridor before the bridge, only to find the door sealed, and worse, bodies. Hundreds of crew torn apart, piled high against the inner side of the blast door. Their blood seeped through the seams, dripping onto the deck like rain. The door mechanism sparked uselessly, jammed by the sheer weight of corpses. "Emperor's blood," Malachor growled. "These beasts killed them to bar our way." Kale spat. "Then we tear it open." Explosive charges were set. Bolters roared, cutting through twisted limbs and shattered bone. The Dark Angels heaved the bodies aside with their armoured might, prying open gaps in the door. The deck groaned, alarms shrieked, the ship trembling more violently with each passing second. 10 minutes to impact. Alaric himself stepped forward, his blade ignited, its plasma edge burning like a shard of the sun. With a bellowed oath, he drove it into the crack, molten steel spraying as he carved through the door's locks. "Push," he roared. The Astartes heaved as one. Metal screamed, the corpses spilling outward in a torrent of gore. With a thunderous crack, the doors finally gave way. The bridge lay before them. It was a slaughterhouse. The walls dripped crimson, the consoles were shattered, the holy Aquila was defiled by splashes of blood. Dead crew lay in heaps, their bodies twisted, their faces frozen in screams. But the hybrids were gone. Only silence remained, broken by the klaxon's wail. 5 minutes intoned the machine spirit coldly. "Man the stations," Alaric bellowed. Astartes surged forward, their massive gauntlets slamming into cogitator arrays, rerouting systems, tearing aside corpses to access the controls. One by one, the command systems groaned to life, their machine spirits growling in defiance. The viewport flared, the hive world's atmosphere burned ahead, the cruiser already entering its upper layers. Flame licked the void, the deck shaking violently as the ship screamed in protest. "Engines, full reverse thrust," Alaric roared. Kale's hands blurred across controls, far too small for his size. Runes flared, machine spirits screamed. Deep within the cruiser, the engines roared to life, their thunder shaking the void. The ship lurched, the deck bucked. Metal shrieked as the cruiser tore against atmosphere, its armor plating ablaze with re-entry fire. "Brace," Malachor thundered, locking his boots to the deck. The world tilted. The hive city loomed ahead, its towers a forest of steel. "Emperor guide us," Kale muttered. The cruiser pulled. Slowly, impossibly, it lifted its nose, tearing away from the city. Towers skimmed past, close enough to scrape the void shields. And then, impact. The Absolution's vow slammed into the barren wastes, miles from the hive. The impact shook the world, hurling mountains of dust into the sky. The shockwave flattened outbuildings for kilometers around. The cruiser carved a scar through the wasteland, its hull tearing open, fire spilling from ruptured decks. Alaric's helm cracked against his console, sparks flying across his vision. For a moment, there was only ringing. But then he rose. Smoke choked the command deck, but the Astartes still stood, battered but unbroken. The cruiser lay wounded, but not destroyed. The hive city, with billions of souls, stood untouched. Alaric's eye burned with fury. "This Xenos abomination," he growled, his voice a thunderclap in the silence. "It has bred. It knows this ship as though it were born to it. We cannot contain this alone." His brothers turned to him, silent, waiting. "We stand within reach of a hive of billions. Should the Xenos spill into the city, the Imperium itself will bleed. We must call for aid. We will summon every sword, every torch, every hammer the Emperor can grant us. For if we fail..." He looked out through the viewport, past the burning wasteland, toward the distant towers of the hive. His jaw clenched. "This world will fall." The Vox crackled as he opened a channel. His words were iron. "This is Captain Alaric of the Dark Angels. We request immediate assistance." The line hissed with static. But then, there was a distant reply. The barren wastes still burned where the Absolution's vow had carved its path into the world. Mountains of ash rose into the sky, blotting out the stars. The wounded strike cruiser lying like a smouldering titan amid the ruins. Fires guttered along her hull. Void shield generators cracked and silent. Around her, Captain Alaric had forged a bastion of steel and faith. A perimeter of bunkers and razor wire stretched outward in a ring, manned by the remaining Dark Angels of the First Company and several hundred void ship security personnel, each armoured in carapace plate and armed with lasguns and shot cannons. Heavy bolters bristled from emplacements carved into the scorched earth, their barrels smoking from hours of battle. Auspec's towers rose like skeletal fingers, scanning the wastes for movement, while servo skulls floated silently between posts, their lenses glowing red. The ground itself bore scars of blood and ichor, where the first probing Xenos shapes had been cut down by bolter fire. The Dark Angels stood as statues amid the smoke, their green and bone-white armour lit by the glow of burning wreckage. Their eyes were hidden behind helm lenses that burned like coals in the dark. Captain Alaric walked the line. His blade was sheathed across his back, his armoured gauntlet resting on its hilt like a predator poised to strike. His Vox barked with updates from within the cruiser, squads sweeping the shattered decks, hunting the last of the abominations that had burrowed into its steel heart. At the southern barricade, Brother Malachor waited like a beast, straining against a chain, his heavy bolter cradled in his arms. At the northern post, Kale oversaw the emplacement of heavy stubbers, scavenged from the ship's armorium. All across the perimeter, the angels of death stood silent, unwavering, as the mortals they commanded whispered litanies and clutched their weapons with trembling hands. Alaric raised his Vox. "Brothers, hold fast. Should even a single Xenos attempt to break our line, it must be annihilated before it reaches the hive. We cannot allow this evil to spread. This is our duty, our oath, our penance." The perimeter answered as one, the voices of the First Company rolling like thunder. "By the Lion, by the Emperor, by death." The sky trembled. Engines roared above the wastes, a sound that cut through the crackle of fire and the howl of the wind. Alaric looked up, his helm lenses narrowing. A descending flame split the clouds, sleek, angular, its prow marked with the seal of the Inquisition. The ship was black and silver, its wings inscribed with purity seals, its hull etched with warding sigils against the warp. The symbol of the Ordo Xenos gleamed upon its brow. The vessel descended upon thrusters of fire, scouring the dust, until it came to rest within the perimeter. Security personnel dropped to their knees at the sight, whispering hurried prayers. Even the Dark Angels stiffened, for none took lightly the arrival of the Inquisition. The ramp hissed open. First came the Death Watch. 10 warriors descended in silence, their armor black as midnight, each shoulder pauldron marked with the colors of their parent chapter. Power swords, heavy bolters, and Xenophase blades glinted in the firelight, their steps shaking the earth. They moved with the weight of men who had stared into the abyss of alien horrors and returned unbroken. And then came their master, an Inquisitor, his cloak snapping in the wind, his carapace armor gilded with sigils of authority. His face was pale, lined with age, but his eyes burned with an unnatural fire. In one hand, he carried a staff topped with a steel aquila. In the other, a pistol of archaic design that hummed with restrained power. The Inquisitor surveyed the wreck of the Absolution's vow, then turned his gaze upon Alaric. "Captain of the Dark Angels," he said, his voice cold as iron. "You called. We have answered." Alaric bowed his head a fraction, the gesture more defiance than respect. "Inquisitor, I am Alaric. The threat aboard my ship is not demonic, but Xenos. They burrowed into our vessel, slew my crew, and even claimed one of my brothers for their brood. My Dark Angels scour the decks as we speak. Meanwhile, I have established this perimeter to ensure none escape into the wastes. If even one of these creatures reaches the hive," he turned his gaze toward the distant spires that gleamed on the horizon, "the world is lost." The Inquisitor regarded him with unreadable eyes. Then he nodded. "It's a sound plan, but your brothers need not shoulder this burden alone." He gestured, and the Death Watch stepped forward, their presence oppressive, like a thunderhead before the storm. "They will aid you in your hunt. The Xenos will not survive this night." For a long moment, silence stretched between the two commanders, Astartes and Inquisitor, each weighing the other. Then Alaric inclined his head once more. "Very well, let them hunt. By the Lion's oath, every shadow aboard that ship will be purged." The Death Watch entered the cruiser like wolves into a bloody den. Their armor seemed to drink the light as they stalked through shattered corridors, bolters whispering death into the dark. One by one, they flushed the hybrids from the shadows, creatures sleek and black, their talons hissing against ceramite, their eyeless heads snapping with inner jaws that struck like lightning. The first was torn apart in a blaze of mass-reactive rounds, its body ripped into fragments of bone and ichor. A second leapt from the rafters, only to be caught mid-air by a Xenophase blade that cut its body into 2 twitching halves. The third took 5 bolter rounds before it fell, hissing. Its blood melting through the walls. The Death Watch fought with brutal efficiency, their tactics honed over centuries of alien war. Yet even they noted the difficulty. "They are fast," growled Black Shield, his voice a rasp of static over the vox. "And their hides, they're thicker than Tyranids. Bolter fire alone does not fell them clean." Another warrior wiped blood from his blade. "They are resilient beasts, but they die all the same." At last they returned, dragging the broken corpse of one of the hybrids behind them. Its carapace still smoked from melter fire, its claws twitching in death spasms. They dropped it before the Inquisitor. He knelt, examining it with gloved hands. He pried open its ribcage, exposing a nest of organs that pulsed with alien corruption. His eyes gleamed as he studied its skeletal ridges, its elongated skull. "Fascinating," he murmured. Alaric stepped forward, his voice a growl. "You know of these creatures?" The Inquisitor shook his head slowly. "They are not Tyranid, though there are similarities. No synapse node, no hive mind link. They are independent hunters, each one clearly lethal." He scraped ichor from its veins, feeding it into a vial that hissed as it sealed. "And yet," he paused, "these things bear traces of Astartes." Alaric stiffened. "What do you mean?" The Inquisitor rose, holding up the vial, the liquid inside glowing faintly. This ichor contains gene seed markers, fragments of transhuman DNA. This creature is not simply Xenos. It is a hybrid. It has consumed the essence of an Astartes, and in doing so, it has evolved. Alaric's gauntlet clenched. His voice was low, deadly. "One of my brothers." A beast tore from his chest as he fell. The Inquisitor regarded him with a cold stare. "Then this parasite can gestate within Astartes. A horrifying prospect. Imagine what it could become given time." His eyes burned as he closed the vial. "This is not a simple infestation. It is a parasitic breed, one that must be annihilated before it spreads beyond this world. You did well to call me, Captain. Without swift action, the Imperium itself would bleed." Alaric's gaze hardened. "Then we burn it, every last shadow." The Inquisitor smiled faintly. "Just so." Far from the perimeter, beyond the burning wastes, the hive city loomed. Its spires stabbed the heavens, each tower a continent of steel, each street below a maze of flickering lumen and endless humanity. Billions toiled within, oblivious to the doom that stalked their borders. And in the shadows of the outer limits, a shape moved. A hybrid xenomorph, its body black as obsidian, its ridges glistening in the half-light. Acid hissed from its maw as it crawled through the rubble, its eyeless head turning toward the towering walls of the hive. It was larger than the others, stronger, the progeny of an Astartes host. It hissed, low and hungry, and began its climb toward the gates. Above, the sky rumbled, the hive lights flickered, and in the silence that followed, a scream echoed faintly from within the walls. A scream that did not sound human. The shadow had reached the city. The corridors of the Absolution's Vow burned. Promethean flames howled down the ruined passageways, devouring Shadow and Ica alike. The Deathwatch moved like executioners through the wrecked cruiser, bolters barking, flamer units sweeping in arcs of cleansing fire. Hybrid corpses blackened and curled in the heat, their acidic blood hissing as it boiled against scorched steel. Every deck became a pyre, every chamber a furnace. Brother Captain Dravik of the Deathwatch raised his hand, his gauntlet dripping with alien flesh. The purge is complete. Sweep the final holds. The Astartes obeyed without hesitation. They were a phalanx of black-armoured giants, their silver chapter insignia gleaming through the smoke. Where the bolters did not thunder, their flamers roared, vomiting fire into nests of alien flesh, clinging to the walls of the ship like tumours. Deep within the cruiser's shattered heart, they found the last brood, nearly a dozen hybrids, snarling in the dark, their claws screeching against bulkheads as they surged forward. The Deathwatch answered with fire. Flamers washed the corridor in searing orange, the air filling with shrieks as the Xenos thrashed and burned. One leapt through the inferno, its carapace blackened, its inner jaws snapping wide, only to be met by a thunderous swing of a Xenophase blade that cut it in two. Minutes later, silence fell. Smoke drifted like funeral incense through the steel tomb. The Deathwatch stood amid the smouldering ruin, their weapons glowing red-hot, their armour covered with ash. "Confirmed," growled Davik. His vox carried the weight of finality. "The ship is purged. Nothing remains." They emerged from the cruiser like revenants from a battlefield. Their boots struck the ash-strewn earth as they carried the stink of burning Xenos into the perimeter. The Inquisitor stood waiting. His staff was grounded in the soil, the Aquila glinting in the firelight. Dravik knelt. "Inquisitor, by bolt and by flame, the infestation is cleansed. No shadow remains aboard the vow." The Inquisitor inclined his head, cold satisfaction in his pale eyes. "Then the Emperor's will is done." Captain Alaric approached, helm maglocked at his side. His scarred face was grim, his voice low as he addressed the Inquisitor. "You have our thanks. Without your hunters, this ship would have been lost. The First Company will not forget this." The Inquisitor allowed a faint smile. "Nor will the Ordo Xenos forget the service of the Dark Angels. But now we must depart." Alaric's brow darkened. "And the specimen you claimed, what will you do with it?" The Inquisitor lifted the stasis canister at his side. Inside, suspended in blue light, a severed hybrid skull twitched faintly, its rigid carapace fractured. "We will study it," the Inquisitor said simply. "Its flesh carries secrets, weaknesses perhaps. If we found it here, then it may not be the last time the Imperium encounters such a breed. We will be prepared." Alaric's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Then may the Emperor's light guide your work. Farewell, Inquisitor." The cloaked figure turned, his Deathwatch falling into formation. Engines roared as their transport lifted into the skies, fire lighting the ash wastes. Soon they were gone, a shadow against the stars. Alaric turned to his brothers, his voice booming over the vox. "Signal the fleet. Send distress to any Dark Angel cruiser within the sector. We will not abandon the Absolution's vow. Begin a full assessment. I want priority repairs underway before nightfall." The Angels of Death obeyed. For days, the crash site became a fortress of industry and prayer. Sparks rained from repair scaffolds as tech marines stalked the broken hull, chanting binaric litanies while they coaxed dead engines to life. Mortals laboured under the eyes of their masters, dragging replacement plating into place, welding the breach closed and clearing the wreckage from hangar bays. The ship groaned like a wounded leviathan, but slowly and painfully she stirred. And always, beyond the labour, the hive city loomed on the horizon. At first, its towers were serene, their lights twinkling like constellations. But then, on the third day, a plume of smoke curled upward from the outer districts. On the fourth, another. On the fifth, the horizon was writhing in fire. Alaric watched from a rampart, his helm lenses narrowing. Something is wrong. On the sixth day, he summoned a squad of 4. "Brothers," he said, his gauntlet tightening around the hilt of his sword. "You will recon the hive. Bring me the truth of what transpires there. Report and return. By no means engage unless forced." The 4 bowed their heads. By the lion, it will be done. They set out across the ash wastes, their armour cloaked in dust, their bolters held low. The sky was bruised with smoke. The earth was cracked and blackened beneath their boots. As they neared the hive, the sound reached them. Distant, but thunderous. A chorus of screams carried on the wind. The gates of the hive loomed. Titanic slabs of adamantium. But before them sprawled a nightmare. The streets were rivers of blood. Civilians fled in endless torrents, their faces pale with terror, their cries drowned beneath the roar of gunfire. Arbites squads fired shotguns into swarming shapes, only to be dragged screaming into the dark. PDF troopers unleashed volleys of lasfire, their lines collapsing as Kitin and Claw ripped through them. The hybrids were everywhere. They crawled along the hive walls, talons digging into ferrocrete, hissing as they tore into gunners on the ramparts. They flooded through the streets in black tides, their elongated skulls gleaming in the light of burning buildings. They were legion, thousands upon thousands, their numbers swelling with every passing heartbeat. On the lower levels of the hive, it had begun with whispers, disappearances in the night, screams in the tunnels. But when the first brood burst forth, they multiplied with terrifying speed. Their breeding became unchecked, their hosts unending. Now, the infestation had erupted in full. The recon squad moved like shadows, watching from the ruins of a toppled hab block. One of them muttered a prayer. Another clenched his bolter until the metal groaned. "This city is lost," growled Brother Seraphon. His voice was heavy with rage. "We were too late." They turned back, sprinting across the wastes as the hive burned behind them. Black smoke filled the sky, blotting out the stars. When they finally reached the perimeter, they fell before Alaric, their armour scarred with ash. "Captain," Seraphon rasped, "the city is overrun." These hybrids are endless, tens of thousands at least. The horde spreads even now. Alaric's face hardened to stone. For a long moment he said nothing. His gaze was fixed on the burning horizon. Then he raised his vox. Inquisitor, this is Alaric of the Dark Angels. The Xenos has returned. The hive is infested. For a heartbeat, only static. Then the Inquisitor's voice cut through, cold and iron hard. We will return. The vox clicked dead. Alaric's fist tightened on his blade. The fires of the hive lit the night sky, a storm on the horizon. His men watched in silence, their eyes burning behind helm lenses. The shadow had awakened, and war was coming. The void above the world burned with the light of engines. The Eternum Lex, the inquisitorial flagship of the Ordo Xenos, descended into orbit like a blade of judgment. Its cathedral spires stretched into the void, its weapon decks glowing with a silent menace. Every line of the vessel spoke of absolute authority, an unyielding monument to the Emperor's will. From the bridge of the Absolution's Vow, Captain Alaric of the Dark Angels watched. His armor was cracked, scorched from recent battle. His features were grim beneath the pale glow of failing hololiths. The Inquisitor's voice crackled across the voxnet, calm, cold, carrying the weight of absolute command. Captain Alaric, you and your marine retinue will present yourselves aboard my vessel, immediately. There was no question, no request, only the Inquisitor's decree. Alaric's jaw tightened, but he bowed his head. As the Emperor wills it. Within the hour, a shuttle cut from the wounded flank of the Absolution's Vow. Its engines howled as it rose from the ash-strewn wasteland, leaving behind the downed strike cruiser and the hive city's burning silhouette. Through the narrow viewports, Alaric and his Astartes beheld the looming titan of the Eternum Lex. Black and gold, adorned with sculpted gargoyles and aquilae, it radiated dread and majesty. The shuttle docked with a thunderclap of maglocks. A hiss of steam filled the air as the boarding ramp dropped. The Inquisitor was waiting. He stood like a shadow at the far end of the docking bay, a tall figure in a dark cloak, his staff topped with a silver aquila. Deathwatch Astartes flanked him, their black armor gleaming with fresh purity seals. Their helmets were faceless and cold. Behind them loomed servitors and adepts, their augmetic limbs twitching as they worked. Alaric strode forward, his sword hanging heavy at his hip. His retinue followed in silence, their boots striking the steel with a solemn rhythm. The Inquisitor's pale eyes locked on him. Captain Alaric, based on your message, the situation in the hive is untenable. There is only one course left. Alaric bowed his head, then straightened, defiance flickering in his eyes. You speak of purging the city, but reinforcements are already en route. With their aid, we can drive back the infestation. The Emperor's blade does not falter. Give us time, and the city can yet be saved. The Inquisitor's lips curved into the faintest echo of a smile. Perhaps you are right. Perhaps 1,000 angels of death could scour the hive, but we both know this breed of Xenos. They do not simply fall. They endure, they escape, they return. And when they do, they are stronger. Alaric's voice hardened. Then you mean Exterminatus? The Inquisitor's eyes glimmered. I have considered it, but this world's resources are too valuable. Planetary destruction remains a last resort. He turned, motioning to a stasis casket borne by servitors. Within its reinforced casing rested a sleek warhead, its surface etched with hexagrammic wards and the sigil of the Ordo Xenos. Instead, we will deploy this. The Inquisitor's voice lowered, reverent and terrible. It's a modified virus bomb, engineered to unravel this species at the molecular level. My team has perfected it since last we met. We have named them, Captain. Xenomorphs. And this is their doom. Alaric's fists clenched. You cannot. My ship still has thousands of crew upon the surface. They labor to restore the vow. They are faithful sons and servants of the Emperor. The Inquisitor chuckled, the sound like a knife across stone. You speak of thousands, while below billions will perish, and yet you protest. His gaze sharpened, iron hard. You should be grateful I permitted you to come with your Astartes at all. That indulgence was granted only because of your cooperation thus far. Do not test my patience. The silence between them was a blade's edge. Alaric's jaw worked, his fury barely contained. At last, he bowed his head. As you command. The Inquisitor smiled. A wise decision. He turned to his attendants. Prepare deployment. From the prow of the Eternum Lex, the virus bomb was released. It fell like a comet, a gleaming shard of judgment hurtling toward the burning hive below. The void trembled with its descent. Then high in the upper atmosphere, it bloomed. The detonation was silent in the void, but on the surface, it was a scream that tore the sky. A sphere of light blossomed, spreading in an expanding halo of virulent fire. Microscopic death spilled into the air, invisible and unstoppable. Below, the hive was a battlefield. Civilians screamed as hybrids tore through them in rivers of blood. Arbites and PDF fought and died amidst barricades of corpses. Xenomorphs surged in endless black tides. Then the air changed. It began with a cough. Soldiers faltered mid-volley, clutching their throats as black veins spiderwebbed across their skin. Their flesh blistered, their eyes bled, their lungs melted to slurry. Civilians staggered, collapsing in spasms as their bodies liquefied. Arbites tore off their helmets, shrieking as their faces fell away. The Xenomorphs screamed louder still. Their skin cracked, bubbling like wax, ichor hissing as it boiled away. Their inner jaws snapped in blind fury before dissolving away entirely. They writhed on the ferrocrete streets, their elongated skulls splitting open as their bodies melted into steaming pools of acid and gore. Everywhere, life screamed, then fell silent. In less than an hour, the hive was dead. Billions of corpses melted into rivers of sludge, seeping into the lower levels. The towers that once shone with light now stood black and lifeless. monuments to a city slain in a single breath. From orbit, the hive glowed faintly, a necropolis shrouded in a toxic mist. For 3 days, the Eternum Lex held its vigil above the world. Auspex arrays swept the surface, gunships scoured the wastes, servitors sampled the air, soil, and water. Nothing lived. The Inquisitor walked the command deck like a wraith, silent but satisfied. The Dark Angels aboard endured rigorous testing. Their gene seed was analysed, their bodies were scoured for contamination. None were found wanting. At last, the Inquisitor summoned Alaric. The purge is complete. Your distress call has drawn your brethren. Another strike cruiser has entered orbit. You and your men are free to depart. Through the hololithic displays, Alaric beheld the green colours of another Dark Angel ship, answering their summons, too late to save the billions below. On the docking deck, Alaric turned to his brothers. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes burned with guilt. Brothers, board the strike cruiser. Return to the chapter. Report what has passed here. One of his veterans bowed his head. What about you, Captain? Alaric's gaze turned to the Inquisitor, who waited like a shadow by his retinue. I will remain. I failed to stop this Xenos. I failed to save our crew, and in that failure, billions of innocents have perished. I will not return to the rock in shame. He stepped forward, his voice iron. Inquisitor, I ask for penance. Let me serve with the Death Watch. Let me atone with the only coin left to me. With my blade. The Inquisitor studied him in silence. Then slowly he smiled. The Death Watch can always find use for a warrior such as you. Alaric bowed his head. His brothers hesitated, then saluted in silence before boarding the waiting strike cruiser. Engines roared and soon they were gone, leaving their captain in the Inquisitor's shadow. Deep within the Eternum Lex, in a vault warded with sigils and steel, the specimen still remained. It twitched in its stasis field, its fractured skull gleaming in blue light, its inner jaws frozen mid-snap, a grotesque trophy of a dangerous new breed. A lone crewman entered the chamber. His robes were grey and plain, his face pale beneath the glow. He moved with practiced ease, tending to consoles, checking seals. The servitors ignored him. He was just another faceless labourer. When the last echo of footsteps faded, he leaned close to the casket, his lips curling into a smile. Beneath his flesh, something shifted, something inhuman. In the silence, he whispered, "Be still, little one. You will not end here. You will be offered to the great Saviour, to the endless swarm." His eyes gleamed with unnatural delight. They are coming. He pressed a hand against the glass, reverent, trembling. The chamber's lights flickered, the hum of the stasis field deepened, and in the dark, the cultist's whisper became a prayer. Glory to the Star Children. Glory to the Hive.